What's the most physical pain you've ever been? I had pectus excavatum. In a nutshell, my sternum did not grow out with the rest of my ribcage, and my chest appeared to cave in. This is a birth condition. When I was 15, I had an US procedure to correct it. I had a metal rod placed and my sternum was cranked into place. The rod was fixed to allow the sternum to grow into the proper position. I grossly simplified these two things, but it's just for context. Specifics aren't relevant. Was in the hospital for a week. My chest was inflamed as hell. Eating was sometimes difficult but not unbearable, and moving around was a bit uncomfortable. Nothing really painful happened at the hospital, oddly enough. It was the day I went home. I had not produced a BM since the procedure. 1 week plus. The doctors and my parents tried everything from a suppository to a full-blown enema and nothing. I get home and my dad starts pumping me full of prune juice. That evening, we are eating dinner, and my dad keeps telling me to drink more prune juice. I tell him that I'm full and not feeling all that good. Dad pushes me to keep drinking more. I relent and keep drinking, and then it hits. I beeline to my bathroom to try and puke. But my chest is still inflamed and my body simply could not throw it up. Whatever it was that was coming up was fighting against this swollen chest cavity, and it felt like I was being ripped open from the stomach up. At the same time, I couldn't breathe. I was basically drowning in my own vomit. I genuinely felt like I was going to die and I was powerless to stop it. For what seemed like minutes, I finally vomited it out. I don't even know what it was, and I didn't care. I was laid out on my bathroom floor wailing in pain to the point that it drove my siblings out of the house. After it was all over, my dad helps me off the floor, hugs me, and says, "I'm so sorry, son." It's one of only 2 times in my life that I saw my father cry. The other was when his mother died, and in an instance that can only be described as ... because of course, the BM occurs a few hours later. I had this procedure as well. My first time I accidentally sneezed still haunts me. I can't imagine throwing up. One of the first nights recovering in the hospital, I was all alone and in a lot of pain. I triggered my epidural for more drugs direct to my spine, but instead of relieving the pain, it got a million times worse and my whole chest started to clench around the newly inserted bar that was impaling my chest. I tried asking the nurse for more painkillers but they couldn't because they didn't have the authority to prescribe, so I just wept alone. Eventually I was allowed to trigger the epidural machine again, and over hours the pain gradually subsided. My bar stayed in for 2 years until I started getting a terrible stinging burning pain under my arm. When the surgeon removed the bar, he said my body had begun to grow bone around it. Came here to say pectus. Just got my bars out a few weeks ago and I am already feeling so much better than the 3 years with them in. The removal surgery was so easy and I only took Advil and ibuprofen for the pain. The pain from the bars being placed was unbelievable and I would never choose to willingly go through that again. I had my nerves frozen and I cannot fathom the experience people without that went through. Also fuck opiate-induced constipation. I also had pectus excavatum. I had the procedure done at about 19 or 20 though. They didn't let me leave the hospital until I had a BM, which was on day 5 after they gave me a suppository. The worst pain for me was when they had me try to walk on day 2 or 3. Since I had been laying in the hospital bed since the procedure, I stood up, doubled over in pain, and laid back down on the bed. In addition to the pain meds they were giving me, they gave me a shot of morphine since the movement made my chest act up so much. That stuff was magic. Before I left I had thrown up at some point because some of the meds were making me queasy. You could imagine my panic at having to throw up after having this surgery done, but I was lucky and it didn't hurt too much. I was more focused on puking. had a tooth drilled and pulled out piece by piece. One of the roots of the tooth that was being removed was stuck under the root of a healthy tooth. The dentist stopped and told me to go to emergency surgeon, where I waited in the lobby for an hour and a half for him to finish up with someone else. The numbing from the previous dentist was long gone and I was stuck waiting with a drilled hole in my mouth and exposed root waiting. I can't even think about that memory too long before I get sick to my stomach. My worst pain ever story is also about teeth. I had a wisdom tooth pulled in prison. The toothbrushes they give you are super short, so it's harder to stab someone with them if you file one end to a point. So my already damaged wisdom tooth on the bottom needed to be pulled. It took months to finally get an appointment with the prison dentist. When I went in, I told him what the problem was. He said they'd pull it and gave me a form to sign, basically releasing them from all liability. I laid back in the chair and then someone came over and held me down. The dentist pried my mouth open and took a tool and literally jammed it under my wisdom tooth in one swift motion. He then yanked it up in another swift motion, basically ripping my wisdom tooth out in the most violent possible way. No numbing shots or even any fucking rage. The pain was literally blinding. My ears started ringing and I just saw white for several seconds. They then just stood me up, pushed me out of the room, and the guard there gave me a single, small square of gauze and told me I could get some low-strength ibuprofen from commissary next week if I had any money on my books. My jaw and mouth were sore as fuck for like a week. I also had a molar that was infected and abscessed at one point while I was locked up. They wouldn't do anything for me and the ibuprofen wasn't cutting it. So I traded some stamps to a guy from laundry for a safety pin and traded some more stamps for a lighter. Sat in my bunk one night and heated up the end of the safety pin to sterilize it and then dug it into my gum below the infected tooth and dug around until I managed to drain the abscess. Hurt like fuck, but my tooth felt so much better afterward. Worst pain I felt was a tooth. After a dentist tried to do a root canal but failed, had to visit an endodontist. He put a filling in, but infection blew up later that day. It still gives me troubles, and it was 8 years ago. Note, I have had 6 surgeries in my life, 2 knee injuries, gallbladder removal, hernia surgery, and 2 spinal surgeries. Had epididymitis, shingles, arthritis in the hip, and other fun things. Torn labrum in the shoulder, and arthritis in the thoracic spine. Tooth abscess remains the most severe pain I've ever experienced. At the age of like 25 I did something to my back shoveling snow. Never in my life have I had a pain like that. I literally could barely move for a week and it took like 2 more weeks to not have hold my back all day. Did not understand until then how much I took for granted no back issues. Could barely wipe my ass without puking. Was so random too. First ever time I had done something to my back and I have had no problems with it since. I'm surprised I had to scroll this far. I had it when I was 13 and I remember just rocking back and forth in my bed sobbing. It was nighttime so I didn't want to disturb my parents, but it finally got to the point I had to. My mom drove me to the and the doctor said, "Oh, it's just a bad stomachache, here's some antacid." I said no way, took the medicine, and as they pulled the curtain back to let me go I vomited all over the floor. They did a few more tests and then rushed me into surgery for an emergency appendectomy. I hear ya. I had 2 months of pain where they told me it was IBS, then it ruptured and I was rushed to surgery. Worst pain was a couple days after surgery. They had a 1-inch diameter tube with little holes all along it inserted in my lower abdomen to suck out the poison inside of me. When the nurse removed it, she put one hand on my chest and, grabbing the tube in her other fist, she ripped it out of me like she was trying to start a stubborn lawn mower. I have never made an involuntary noise like that before and I hope never to again. I remember when my appendix ruptured, I was working a server job, threw up in the dish pit trash can and was sent home. Laid around in absolute misery waiting to feel better for a few hours. Finally was convinced I was actually dying and had my brother take me to the After a 3-hour wait in the emergency room I was able to see a doc. Took a urinary test, positive for ruptured appendix. and 20 minutes later I was in emergency surgery. I've broken multiple bones, almost cut a finger off, but by far and away that was the absolute worst pain I've ever experienced. I have cancer. On chemo I have to take these bone marrow booster injections. They cause bone pain. The first time it happened I thought I was dying. I swear I could feel every vertebrae. My ribs had toothache. It felt like I had rodents in my bones trying to gnaw their way out. I now take Oramorph to counteract the pain. It's bearable then. Fucking cancer. Edit. I should point out I've had open abdominal surgery, broken bones, had stitches, injuries and dislocations. I have had peritonitis and liver surgery. This is worse than all of them, though the open abdominal surgery is a close second. Oh my god. I had one above my front teeth when I was 10. I kept telling my mother I was in pain. She thought it was growing pains and insisted I was just being dramatic, and we treated it with Oragel for almost a month. It wasn't until my face started to disfigure from the swelling, infection that she finally brought me to get help. I ended up losing 2 of my front teeth and having to go through extensive surgery to repair the damage it did to the front of my skull. Not a good time. I've had 2 of those, on back-to-back Christmas visits to my in-laws. The second year one was taking Hydromorph tablets every 12 hours and almost drinking a bottle of liquid Oragel. The first morning the dentist was open after Christmas. I was waiting outside one day, opened the doors and was in a chair within 10 minutes. Guy asked if I wants to try antibiotics to save the tooth. I said get this thing out of my face now. Pure relief lol. Oh hey, I had one of those on my asshole. Had to get it lanced multiple times, one of which I was awake for, and the numbing didn't work very well due to infection, so I felt an insane amount of pain for about 20 minutes straight while he operated on my asshole, sewed a rubber tube to it for draining, while I lay on the table shaking uncontrollably and sweating bullets. Taking shit sucked. Eventually they decided to just put me under and do the full operation and get it done. Turns out there was a fistula that needed to be dealt with as well. Super fun. Perianal abscess was the name of the particular issue. Did you know a dental abscess changes your pH to the point Novocaine doesn't work? Interesting little tidbit I learned when I went to the dentist about my abscess. They were so concerned about it, they pulled the tooth anyway, and then cut my gum open to let it drain, all with no anesthesia whatsoever. So, the slight phobia I had if the dentist graduated to a major phobia. Yeah, dental pain sucks rocks. I'm highly tolerant of anesthesia, numbing shots, and that diagnosis did not reach my urologist when I got the vasectomy. I felt the whole thing, everything, all of it. The nurse took me aside afterwards and asked me how I was doing, and she said, "I've done 5,000 of these, and I've never seen a patient feel that much of the procedure." The first time my dad had a kidney stone, my mom drove him to the hospital. I was in the back seat, maybe 10 years old. My dad kept trying to open his door and presumably jump out of the car. My mom kept locking the door back as soon as he would unlock it. He kept saying, "Just let me fall out. It will knock me out so I won't be in pain anymore." My mom was doing like 70 miles per hour, so it would have definitely done more than just knock him out. I've had about 25 kidney stones in my life. They started at 28 and I'm now 37. Some just cause minor stomach discomfort and pass with a sharp pinch a few days later. Others just start as a dull ache and then proceed to build and build, until it turns into agonizing jolts of pain that get longer and longer. The hospital won't do anything unless the stone is over a certain size, so you end up there just for pain management. I get them so often I just drink tons of water and tough it out. It is not easy. I've puked from pain and wished I would pass out. I remember one year one got a stone in the middle of a blizzard. I was in agony and my wife begged me to let her drive me to the hospital. I argued for a while because I didn't want her driving in bad weather, but I knew it was only going to get worse out. As we neared the hospital, someone had plowed snow into the road. Her car got stuck, and I didn't want her in danger getting out, so I got out and pushed us free. Then we headed up the hill before the hospital and her car couldn't make it. I got out again, pushing the car while vomiting. I just didn't have the strength to get her up the hill enough, so she slowly backed down to a lower lot. As we sat there, a shuttle came that transported doctors to the hospital. I asked in the most desperate way if he could give us a ride. He agreed. When I finally got the morphine at the hospital, it was the best I've ever felt in my life. Good thing you went to the ER. I have a family member who deals with chronic kidney stones. They can pass as many as 4 a month. For most kidney stones, the solution is pain management and just letting them pass. So they have worked out a pain management system with their nephrologist, kidney doctor, to deal with it at home. Because they pass so many kidney stones, they didn't realize there was a problem until they had gone septic. They had a 12 mm stone blocking their urinary tract, and had been for about a week. I had 2 kidney stones. One was 1x2.5, and the other was 0.5 inches. Laser surgery was not successful, but they sent me home with a call and prescription for pain meds. Cigna would not approve the prescription, so I spent 4 hours peeing blood and passing pieces of stone the laser had broken off. I was screaming loud enough my son put on his noise-canceling headphones because he said my screams were making his testicles ascend. Got PCNL 2 months later. Gout is my number 1 as well. I get mild cases often and deal with it, but I feel like it's misunderstood by many people how debilitating and painful it can be. The worst case I had was when the inflammation was up to my left knee and barely got my shoe off because of the pain and swelling. The pain is like when your foot starts coming to after falling asleep. That intense tingling. Well, amplify that. If doesn't go away and gets worse if you touch it or step. Caffeine triggers mine, so I live with constant inflammation or lethargy. Thanks Dad lol. My first attack was when I was 22. I'd just eaten a steak for the first time in like 6 months. Delicious and medium rare. The pain came and went in waves that felt like someone was hammering needles into my left big toe joint every 20-30 seconds. Nothing helped. Not heat. Not ice, not moving, not staying still. Sometimes I would step on and the pain would shoot up my shin and my whole leg would collapse under me. I got almost no sleep for like 4 days. Nowadays I stay away from all meat, alcohol, sugar. I wouldn't wish that pain on my worst enemy. A few years ago I randomly got pain circling my abdomen or around my ribs. It had me screaming on the floor in tears while wrapping my arms around my middle. It came on so suddenly and my brother, who was with me, had no idea what was happening. He rang 999 and they sent a paramedic. By the time the paramedic had arrived, maybe 15-20 minutes later, it had already started to subside. The paramedic couldn't figure it out, so I ended up going to the hospital. After multiple tests, no one could give me an answer to why I just suddenly had such agonizing pain. To this day it's the worst pain I've ever felt and I don't even know what triggered it. I had something similar. Woke up around 4 a.m. with a horrible, searing pain on my right side like inside my ribcage. Felt like the worst side cramp I ever felt in my life. It hurt so badly that I could hardly actually breathe. BC breathing aggravated the spot. Somehow I managed to get myself to the Minute Clinic down the road right when they opened at 7 a.m. Spent my time lying in agony in my bed up until then. Pretty sure the pain was so bad I cried a bit too. Minute Clinic immediately wanted to send me to the hospital. I was in no condition to drive myself there. So I found my only friend with a car wake at 7:15 in the morning and I spent the day in the hospital. Did a bunch of tests but nothing came back conclusive, so they told me they thought I had pleurisy, which is an inflammation of the lining of the lungs. I still to this day don't really think that's what I had. I still think it must have been something potentially gallbladder related. Count me as another vote for gallstones. I used to get a random bouts of that exact sort of pain that you described and no one could ever figure out what was going on. Then 10 years ago I had to be driven to the ER after the pain had been particularly bad, and turns out my gallbladder was infected from gallstones. The inflammation was so bad I had to be hooked up to N4 for 2 days while they waited for the inflammation to go down so they could remove my gallbladder. Those first few days of my hospital stay are easily some of the worst I've ever had to go through, but thankfully I had a great surgical team and the rest of my stay and recovery went by smoothly.